Hey everyone, this is Eric Bond, the founder of Beat the GMAT, and welcome to today's session. It's called Demystifying the GMAT Exam, a closer look at AWA and Verbal, Part 2. So as you might have guessed, today is part 2 of a two-part webinar series that we are co-hosting with our friends, the GMAC, the makers of the GMAT test. Last week, we had a great session that focused on integrated reasoning as well as quant. Many of you attended that session. It was very, very interesting. And I hope you're excited about these topics today. So the purpose of part 2 of this webinar is to take a closer look at these sections. We're also going to include some study tips, some analysis of GMAT questions, as well as some general insights in terms of how the GMAT scores are used in the admissions process. So this is going to be a very, very helpful session. And in a moment, I'm going to hand over the reins to our presenter today, Trevor Reaske. I'll go through his bio in a moment. We will have a live Q&A at the end of this session. Trevor is going to stick around to the end of this hour to make sure that we answer as many of your questions live as we can. So if you have a question at any time, you can submit it in the GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen. There is a chat box area where you can just enter your question, put your question in there at any moment, and our team is going to be monitoring the questions as they come in, and we will serve them up to Trevor when the Q&A portion of today's webinar happens. And just also a note, please do not ask any profile evaluation questions. This isn't the appropriate webinar for those types of questions. So a little bit about Trevor Reaske. Trevor is currently the Field Marketing Coordinator at the Graduate Management Admission Council, GMAC, makers of the GMAT test, based in Reston, Virginia in the United States. So currently he works with a variety of educational partners like Beat the GMAT to increase awareness of the GMAT exam, as well as graduate management education. He also oversees student outreach and a variety of diversity initiatives and activities. And Trevor himself is highly familiar with competitive admissions. He got his bachelor's from Virginia Tech in marketing management. So all that being said, Trevor, welcome back to Beat the GMAT, and thank you so much for leading us in this part 2 of this series.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Glad I could come back. Glad I got invited back for a second one. So
always.
So as Eric kind of mentioned, this is part 2 of our two-part webinar series. So last week we took a look at the integrated reasoning and the quantitative section. So there are 2 more sections left on the exam, those being the analytical writing assessment and the verbal section. So we'll take a look at those today. Just a quick agenda. We're going to go over what the GMAT covers, and I'll give you a quick overview of all the sections as well as the timing and things like that. And then we'll just dive right into it with the analytical writing assessment and the verbal section, show you what's on it, what's being tested. I have some examples for you, so keep the audience on their toes there. Last week we had a pretty smart group of people getting the questions right, so this group this week has a lot to live up to. And then I'll go over some ways that you can kind of prepare for the GMAT. Honestly, that's one of the biggest questions I get on a day-to-day basis talking with potential test takers is, what's the best way to prepare? So we'll go over some of the study materials that we have, as well as, you know, people often wonder, how much time do I need to put in studying? What's the most effective way to do that? So we'll talk a little bit about study tips and go from there. So if you're on the webinar last week, I apologize for these first couple of slides. It might be a little bit of a review, but I want to make sure those that weren't able to join us last week also get this information. So the GMAT itself is made up of 4 sections. So as I mentioned last week, we talked about the integrated reasoning and the quant. And this week we're going to talk about the first section there, analytical writing assessment. So this is where you start off the exam. You have 30 minutes for this section. And if you think about writing an essay, one tip I could give is that 30 minutes is not a ton of time to write an essay, or at least a long essay. So keep in the back of your head as we go through the rest of this presentation that one of the main things that we're looking for in the analytical writing assessment is can you clearly and concisely make a point and back it up, that kind of thing. So that's how you get started, 30 minutes there. You then jump into the integrated reasoning section, which is made up of 12 questions for another 30 minutes. After that section, you're given the option of taking a break. What I would say about the breaks is they are not very long. They're only 8 minutes. So if you think about that, it's probably enough time to go get a drink of water, maybe use the restroom, that kind of thing. When you're preparing and you do take a practice exam or something like that and you want to take the break, time that out because, I don't know, maybe if you're a smoker and you want to go outside and have a cigarette, does that take more than 8 minutes? It may. Are there a lot of other people in the testing center that are also coming back from a break at the same time? You're going to need to get checked back into the testing center. So these are all kind of things that you want to keep in mind for those breaks. No one's going to babysit you. No one's going to come get you if you're late. That time is just going to be deducted from the next section. So something to keep in mind as you're kind of preparing. It may seem silly to practice taking a break, but it's definitely something I would recommend doing. After you come back from your break on time, hopefully, you jump into the quant section, which we talked about last week. And I believe Eric is actually going to post the link so you can access that webinar if you were not able to join us last week, where we did some examples and things like that there. You have 37 questions in the quant section, 75 minutes there. You're given the option of another break after you finish that section, and you come back up and finish with the other section we'll talk about today, which is the verbal reasoning section. 41 questions there, and again, 75 minutes. All in all, you're looking at about 3.5 to 4 hours total time of taking the exam, if you take the breaks and everything. So not too bad. I know there are some other exams out there that are considerably longer, so 4.5 hours is doable. So I wanted to real quickly touch on the overall admissions process. So I apologize for those that were on the webinar last week. This will be kind of a review for you, but I think it's pretty important to kind of understand where the GMAT fits in the overall admissions process. So as you're thinking about getting ready to go back to school and you're thinking about taking the GMAT, I'm sure you've realized at this point that the GMAT is just one part that's going to go into your overall application. So if you imagine here we have a scale, and on the left represents the GMAT. So the GMAT itself is going to provide, obviously, value to those in the admissions department of the programs you're applying to, right? Otherwise, you would hope to accomplish this by taking a test. You want them to see your academic potential. You want to be compared across all applicants, especially if you have a great score, right? So that's where the GMAT kind of provides value to the admissions office. It also kind of provides value to you as an applicant in many ways. The top there being the opportunity to stand out in a crowd. A lot of people are going to be applying to the same program that you're applying to. Having a GMAT score kind of helps differentiate you from the rest of those applicants. The second bullet point there talks about other parts of your application. So let's say maybe you don't have the greatest undergraduate GPA, or you maybe don't have as much work experience, but a high GMAT score can kind of help balance those factors out. There are intangible things, too, that the GMAT will help you with, things like confidence. I know if my GMAT score was a little bit higher, I would certainly feel a lot more confident about myself going into a graduate program. So studying and preparing for the GMAT can kind of help make you more confident as a future graduate student. And then the last one there, preparation for school. So when we're creating the GMAT exam questions, we're not just sitting in a room coming up with questions that we think are fun and challenging. There's a reason that the questions are asked the way they are, and they're testing skills that schools want to see their students have. One of the main ideas behind the GMAT is that it's a predictor of success in a graduate program, meaning that if you do well on the GMAT, you'll do well in the graduate program. So the skills that we test on the GMAT are skills that you're going to need to use in your graduate program. So whether you realize it or not, in preparing for the GMAT, you're actually preparing for school as well. If you look at the right side of our scale here, we have other things that are going to be important in the overall admissions process, but are not tested on the GMAT. And you can see these kind of skills are kind of balancing out the overall admissions process. Things like your leadership skills and potential, your ability to work in teams, job-specific skills, business knowledge, those kinds of things. They'll come out at other points in the application process, most likely, but not on the GMAT. Spoken English is another important one. So you may be asked to have a good command of spoken English in your graduate program, but that's not necessarily tested on the GMAT because we don't ask you to speak. There's no speaking component of the exam. So hopefully you can kind of see where the GMAT fits in with some of the other skills and things that you'll need in the overall application process. So, as I just mentioned, the skills that we're testing on the GMAT directly relate to skills that you're going to need in a graduate program. So let's start out with the analytical writing assessment. What we're asking you to do here is analyze an argument. This directly relates to a lot of skills that you're going to use in business school, most notably conceptualization, argument formulation, and effective written communication. We're not asking you to write an essay just because we want to read essays and see what you have to say. We're seeing, do you have these skills in a written form? So I'm going to go into basically the scoring of the exam real quick. There's a lot of tiny writing here, and I don't want to spend too much time going through each one. But you know, it's important to kind of realize before you take the exam how it's scored, obviously. The analytical writing assessment is scored on a 0 to 6 scale, 6 being the best of the best. So if you want to look this up later, it's on our website, mba.com. You can read it in more detail. Basically, on the analytical writing assessment, we're asking you to analyze an argument with the characteristics here to make a good essay, to make a strong essay. So go back and read these a little bit later. Just want to let you know that this is how the essay is scored. So who is actually reading your essay? So essays, as I mentioned, are scored on the 0 to 6 scale. Essays are scored independently twice and then averaged. So each essay in the AWA section is given 2 independent ratings, one of which may be performed by an automated essay scoring engine, so basically some computer software. The automated essay scoring engine is an electronic system that evaluates more than 50 structural and linguistic features, including things like organization of ideas and topical analysis, things like that. So it's designed in a way that it'll look for certain things in your essay. As you can see on the slide here, your essay is also graded essentially by college and university faculty members. What they're looking for is the overall quality of your ideas about the argument that you present, your ability to organize, develop, and express those ideas, relevant supporting reasons and examples you used. So it's one thing to kind of present an argument, but do you have relevant supporting evidence to help you strengthen that? And then your ability to control the elements in standard written English. So in considering the elements of standard written English, the readers are trained to be sensitive and fair in evaluating the responses of examinees whose first language is not English. So if you're overly concerned that English is not your first language and you're just terrified of this essay section, just know that our readers are trained to be sensitive in that fact. One thing I'll point out here too is that if you feel like your score for the AWA section of the GMAT is not accurate, there is the option to request, say, your essay will be rescored, and you can do that via mba.com. What I will say about that is if you do think it was graded wrong or you don't think that's the score that you actually got, you can resubmit it, but that doesn't guarantee that you'll get a better score. You could possibly go down. So just something to keep in mind. So one thing you want to keep in mind when you're writing your essay is you're going to be presented with an argument. You want to kind of keep your personal opinion out of it for the most part. What we're really looking for here is when you see this argument, are there any questionable assumptions that underlie the thinking behind the argument. So did the author of the argument make any assumptions that aren't explicitly written? Are there any alternative explanations or counterexamples that might weaken their conclusion? So can you point to anything there? Or maybe along those lines, what would help strengthen or refute, or what would help strengthen the argument, right? So is there anything that you can use to make the argument better? That kind of stuff. So something to keep in mind there. So I'm going to real quickly show you an example, and I'll give you 30 seconds or so to read the prompt. So this is typical of what you would see in terms of a prompt on the AWA section. This is just one of them. I realize I could show you more, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to show you the one. MBA.com would be a great resource in terms of finding more prompts and things like that. So just read that over real quick. Again, this is someone making an argument for or against something, right? That's how these are going to be structured. All right, so hopefully you got a chance to read that. These are going to be the instructions that you are given during the AWA section. Just a little tip, save yourself some time. Remember what these instructions are when you're studying. So again, it will remind you how reasoned you find this argument, right? We're not asking for a personal opinion. You may be so morally opposed to a particular argument that you want to just write about that, but what we're asking for is how well reasoned is this argument, right? So it's something to keep in mind. And then what we just kind of talked about, is there any evidence that would strengthen or refute the argument? What changes would make it more logically sound? What, if anything, would help you better evaluate the conclusion? So that's what they're looking for in this essay. And as I mentioned, 30 minutes is not a ton of time, right? Practice writing your essays. A lot of people might just brush this section off. Oh, I know how to write an essay. And then you might run out of time. So practice, find some prompts on MBA.com, practice writing your essays. I'll show you a product that we actually offer called GMAT Write at the end of, towards the end of the session today, that you can actually have your essays graded. But again, 30 minutes is not a ton of time. So what we're looking for is how clearly and concisely can you evaluate this argument and provide supporting information to support your statement. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. You can also see a sample of a 6 essay on MBA.com. All right, so let's move into the verbal section. Like I said before, this is the last section of the exam, so after you finish this, you're home free and you're ready to apply to business school. Again, I'm going to show you just a quick slide of how these sections of the exam, how these question types relate to skills that you'll use in business school. The verbal section is made up of 3 question types. So they are reading comprehension, critical reasoning, and sentence correction. The skills that these are testing are acquiring and integrating information, evaluating different arguments and to help inform your actions, and then communicating precisely and effectively. With the examples, hopefully you can kind of see where these skills come into play. So as I mentioned, you're going to have 3 question types, and they'll be intermingled throughout the section. The reading comprehension questions are up to 350 words long. The topics come from material such as social sciences, physical or biological sciences, business-related areas such as like marketing, economics, human resource management, etc., all that kind of stuff. However, they may be based on those topics, and you generally may be familiar with some of the material, but no specific knowledge of the material is required beforehand. What we're trying to find is, do you have the skills in order to answer the reasoning skills in order to answer these questions? We're not going to ask you a business knowledge specific question, if that makes sense. So what we're looking here is we're going to ask you some questions that are interpretive, applied, and inferential about what you've just read. This section evaluates your abilities to understand words and statements in reading passages, understand the logical relationships between significant points and concepts as you're reading these passages. Are you able to draw inferences from facts and statements? And then finally, another skill that we're looking for here is understanding and following the development of quantitative concepts as they are presented in verbal material. So what does that all mean? Well, I'll show you an example in a second, and hopefully you can kind of see where some of the skills come into play. Critical reasoning questions are a little bit different. The reasoning we're looking for, do you have the reasoning skills involved in making arguments, evaluating arguments, and or formulating a plan of action? So with the critical reasoning section, you're going to get a little bit of a shorter passage, and what we're really looking for is, can you formulate and evaluate a plan of action based on what you just read? Again here, no familiarity with the subject is required. It may come from any one of those topics that I just mentioned, but you don't need any prior knowledge. What we're looking for here is, can you reason effectively in three main areas? The first being argument construction. So questions of this this type may ask you to recognize the basic structure of an argument, properly draw conclusions, underlying assumptions, well-supported explanatory hypotheses, or parallels between structurally similar arguments. Another area that we're looking for here is argument evaluation, and then finally, formulating and evaluating a plan of action, as I kind of touched on. So questions of those types may ask you to recognize the relative appropriateness of different plans of action, factors that would strengthen or weaken a proposed plan of action, or assumptions underlying a proposed plan of action. So you can kind of see a little bit similar to the essay portion here. Are there assumptions made? Is there something you could do to strengthen or weaken what the prompt is? So, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. The third question type is pretty self-explanatory. This is where your grammar and style of the English language comes into play in that sentence correction. You'll be basically asked to correct a portion of a sentence. So I'm going to jump into some examples. If you want, I'll give you a couple minutes and just chat your answer to Eric. I'll show you A, B, C, D, E answers, and we'll see how the audience does on these. So read this passage quickly. I'll show you the answers in a second, or the answer choices in a second. And like I said, just send your answer via the chat. So hopefully you got a chance to look at that, and I'll flip over to the answer choices. As you can see, we have the passage, right, and then you'll be asked a series of questions based on the passage, this being the first in the series. So take a look at the answers there, come up with one, and like I said, chat it on over to Eric.
Yeah, and I fully appreciate that this is a really difficult format for this type of a practice question. It is easier on the real GMAT test in the sense that you'll get to see the passage along with the questions.
Correct.
Obviously that won't work for today's webinar. So for those of you who haven't taken a practice GMAT yet and have not seen what the test looks like, it is a little bit easier than what we're showing here. But try your best. Definitely chat in some. Okay, I'm starting to see some responses. I see a B. See if a couple more will come in. B, another B. C, I see a C or B. B's are starting to win here. Yep, I see another B. Looks like we're trending towards B, Trevor. How are we doing here?
So the answer to this one is actually C. And I'll go through the answers here. So A, transnational cooperation involves projects too big for a single corporation to handle. So the passage doesn't really provide information about the size of the projects or the reasons they chose to work collaboratively. So that's not going to be our answer there. Transnational cooperation results in a pooling of resources leading to high quality performance. So the passage doesn't really provide information about the reasons that the projects are offered as transnational. So that's not really going to be our answer either. For D, joint projects between the United States and foreign corporations are not profitable enough to be worth undertaking. So what the passage talks about is that they are less profitable than single projects, but it doesn't imply that they're not profitable at all. So D would not be an answer there. E, joint projects between the United States and foreign corporations benefit only those who commission the projects. So the passage states that the joint projects benefit the United States firms since they are awarded new contracts. So E is not really going to be the answer. C is the correct answer here. Transnational cooperation has in the past been both more common and less common than it is now among United States firms. So they are experiencing a modest renaissance implies that they are returning to favor after being out of style with it for a little while. So C is the correct answer here. So it sounds like a bunch of you had B. This is an example that you can find on MBA.com. So check it out for a more detailed explanation. Obviously, we're kind of under a time constraint today. But basically what you're going to be doing here is answering a series of questions kind of like this based on one passage. So something to keep in mind, too, is that you'll have the passage to the left and then a series of questions that you'll answer about it, all relating back to the same passage. So you won't have to be reading passage after passage after passage. I think it's 4 questions related to a single passage. So this will be a little bit easier to follow than the reading comprehension. So this is an example of a critical reasoning question. So basically, they're all kind of structured in the same way. You have a little bit of a smaller written portion at the top, so maybe a sentence or 2, and then your answer question below that. So if you want to just take 30 seconds, a minute to read the prompt, look at the question, look at the answers, and again, just chat what you think the answer is over to Eric.
Okay, I see some answers coming in. Again, to chat in your answer, it's just that chat box on the right-hand side of your screen on the GoToWebinar panel. I see an E. I see 3 C's coming in. Another C. Oh yeah, C. 1D here. It looks a little heavy on the C side, Trevor.
Well, that is excellent. C is in fact the right answer. I'm gonna blame the last one on the kind of messed up format there. It seems like
thank you very much, Trevor. Yeah.
Smart group here. So I realized that the last question was a little tough. Hopefully this was easier for you guys. So again, I'll just go through the answers here. So A would not be the right answer. So A, a hiring program will be successful if it includes interviews. Well, the interview is an essential part, but not the only part of a successful hiring program. So there are other things that go into that, so A would not be the correct answer. Kind of like the GMAT is not the only part of your application process, right? B is not a correct answer. The interview is a more important part of a successful hiring program than is the development of a job description. Well, the argument doesn't address the importance of developing a job description, right? So it didn't say anything about that. D is not a correct answer. So the only purpose of an interview is to evaluate whether job applicants' personalities are suited for the requirements of the job. Well, the argument states one thing that can be done with the interview, but it doesn't imply that it's its only purpose, if that makes sense to everyone. E, the fit of job applicants' personalities to the requirements of the job was once the most important factor in making hiring decisions. Well, the argument identifies a way to find people who are not a fit, but does not imply who would be the best fit. furthermore, there's no information about past data or hiring decisions. So that's kind of an assumption, right? C is the correct answer. Interviewers can accurately identify applicants whose personalities are unsuited to the job requirements. The interview can only eliminate those unsuited to the job if personalities can be accurately identified. So that's why C would be the best answer there. So sounds like the group did pretty well with that one. As I mentioned, there are tons more examples out there that you can find. I'll show you some of our prep stuff too, where you'll be able to find hundreds of examples on this kind of stuff. So sentence correction, they'll all be structured in this way. So you'll be given a sentence that'll have an underlined portion. And what you'll do is the answer A is you can always keep that the same. That's always an option that's available to you. B, C, D, E are to change it in some way, change the underlined portion. So if you want to read that real quickly and decide which you think the best answer would be, I'll give you about 30 seconds, a minute to do that.
Okay, I think we're starting to see some answers roll in here. I see a D, a B, a B, more B's. Oh yeah.
All right, excellent. So B is the correct answer again here. So this group is pretty good too. I had a lot to live up to with last week's group, but this group seems pretty good as well. So again, as I mentioned, A would be to keep the question the same. That's a little trick you can kind of remember so that you're not reading through A all the time. It'll save you maybe a second or two, which if you think about it, you only have about 2 minutes, a little more than 2 minutes to answer each question, so that can, those seconds can add up. The reason that that's not correct is the part where it says are a cost to business. It's kind of passive. It's a passive statement. It's not really preferred as the answer. For C, the part where it says already with business cost of, it's kind of awkward and kind of overly wordy. You don't necessarily need to include all that, so that's not the correct answer there. D, the part where it says significant in compounding, that should modify effects of drug and alcohol abuse. It's also kind of awkward and wordy. The use of and suggests that it refers to the use of crack and cocaine when it should refer to the effects. So it's kind of not referring to the right part of the sentence there. E, almost the exact same thing. It's referring to a different part of the sentence. It should be referring to effects. So B is the correct answer there, significantly compounding the effects of drug and alcohol abuse, which already costs business. So sounds like you guys have no problem with that. One thing I do like to point out, though, is that no matter where you take the GMAT throughout the world, it's only going to be offered in English. And obviously this section here, maybe more than some of the others, is where you can really see the effect that the style and grammar of the English language would come into play on the exam. So we do have a ton of prep materials out there. There are a ton of other ones that can help you with this specific portion if you are worried about it. I know I speak to a lot of people who may have a different first language than English, and they're often concerned about this part. It does take practice, and trust me, you've heard me talk today and fumble over my words. It's tough for me as well. So it does take a little bit of practice. It does take some refreshing yourself on grammar rules and that kind of stuff. So sounds like this group, it's not a huge deal, but if you are concerned about it, there's tons of practice out there. Which kind of segues into my next slide here. So These are some of the prep materials that we produce as the official GMAT people. So I'll go over them a little bit. In the top middle there, you'll see a logo for MBA.com. Again, that's our website. It's a great source of information. You can find all of these products there. You can register to take the exam. You can find a testing center that's closest to you, all that good stuff. You can actually research schools. So good resource, and also where you can find all of these products. So GMAT Write in the top left there, as the name kind of implies, helps you with the writing portion of the exam. I'm going to go over that in a little more detail on the next slide, so we'll come back to that. The official review guides down the left there, the turquoise one, the green one, and the blue one. Those are the official GMAT review guides. Those are the ones that we produce. You'll see the little stamp there that says the official guide. What that means is that you're getting official retired GMAT questions. So these are questions that have been used in the past on GMAT exams. We don't want to publish current GMAT questions. We don't want people to have an unfair advantage because they studied, questions that we're using now. So the next best thing is probably using ones that have been used in the past. The turquoise colored review guide there, that includes all the sections of the exam. Now that is the 13th edition. So what's different about the 13th edition is that it does include the integrated reasoning portion. If you have the 12th edition, 11th edition, those are certainly valuable in helping you prepare and giving you practice questions. The 13th is the only one that includes the newest section of the exam. If you want a little more practice with the quant and the verbal, we offer supplement guides for that as well, with some new questions and practice there. GMAT paper tests. So way back when, we offered the exam paper and pencil. We don't do that anymore. It's all only offered on computer. But that being said, we have all these old tests that we're happy to let you download and practice that way if you just want more practice preparing for the GMAT exam. As you can see there, the guide is also available in app form. The GMAT handbook there is a good resource in terms of giving you all the logistical information that you may need for taking the exam. So things like what kind of ID you need for when you show up for your appointment, what time you should actually get there for your scheduled appointment, all that good stuff. So I encourage everyone to kind of at least thumb through that. You can find it on MBA.com. The last thing you want is to study for a few months and pay your $250 and show up to the testing center and be turned away because you don't have the right ID. So just look through there and read over that. We talked about GMAT Focus last week. This is a diagnostic test for the quant section to basically help you figure out where you should spend more of your time studying for the quant. So we talked about that at length last week. The best thing you can do, which I encourage everyone in attendance to do today, is download the GMAT Prep software. It's actually a free download on MBA.com, which all you have to do is create an MBA.com account, which if you're thinking about taking the exam, you'd probably want to do that anyway. What's good about that is there are 2 full-length practice exams. They use the exact same scoring algorithm as the test itself, so what I often encourage people to do is if you're just getting started preparing, take one of those practice exams, mimic the test environment as much as you can. Lock yourself in a room, tell people not to bother you for 4 hours, put your calculator away, put all your study materials away, and really take the test, and you'll get an honest score about where you stand at the current moment. Research your schools, find out what scores they're looking for, and then kind of go from there and formulating a plan for studying. If you're closer than you think or you're further away than you think, it's going to kind of help dictate how you go about studying. So that, like I said, that is a free download on our website. All you have to do is create an account. So GMAT Write, as I kind of just talked about, this is going to help you with the essay portion. There's prompts, you write your essays, and you have the option to get them scored. So it's $29.99 US dollars. You can find it on the MBA.com store. And like I said, it's a good opportunity to kind of see if you're on the right track in writing these essays. You actually have them graded and scored. You'll find out what you'll do. So I encourage, if you're worried about the writing portion, definitely check that out. So as I kind of mentioned, one of the biggest questions that I get when I talk to students is, how long should I study? And we have numbers here documenting, on average, people study about 96 hours for those that get a 700. But I don't want you to get bogged down in the fact that, okay, if I study 96 hours, I'm going to get a 700. It doesn't really work like that. The point of this slide is to stress the fact that preparing is necessary. The GMAT exam, the way it's set up, it's not a test that you can just show up and take and do well. Just because of the question types, they may be a little bit different than you're used to. So I definitely encourage, if you're on this webinar today, you're on the right track. You're thinking about getting ready to take the exam. You're thinking about preparing, and that's great. There are a lot of factors that go into study. Just because you did study for 96 hours, was that an effective 96 hours? There may be times where you're studying and you have a lot of distractions going on, and you see that the right answer is C, and you say, okay, yeah, well, that right answer is C. But did you really understand why the answer was C? Even if you got it right, maybe you just guessed, and you're like, okay, well, I know that one. I can move on. Well, you really want to understand why your answers are right, why your answers are wrong, in order to do well on the exam. That being said, you want to mimic the test environment as much as you can. Also, put away a calculator. Aside from the integrated reasoning section, you're not allowed to have one. You want to shut down your computer unless you're doing the practice exam. Eliminate distractions. Don't get outside help. Be honest with yourself. Are you really preparing the best that you can? Are you setting aside time to specifically study? That's going to be important. Things happen in life where you may not get to devote a full hour, 2 hours to studying, but if you are setting that time aside, you'll have a better chance of success. Becoming comfortable with the test items is important too. It's one thing to know the material, but I think another part of preparing for the GMAT is becoming comfortable with just the way the questions are asked. Like, for example, if you know that, like we talked about before, if you know that A in the sentence correction question is always going to be just keep it the same, that's going to help you. If you know the instructions for the AWA section, that's saving you time from having to read those, right? You go from having 27, 26 minutes to having 30 because you already know what those instructions are. So just little things like that are going to help you in preparing and doing better on the GMAT exam. When you're thinking about your study time also, how long it should be, you want to give yourself plenty of time to study. You want to give yourself time to get the appointment that you need. So the GMAT is essentially offered on demand, but it's done by appointment basis. You want to make sure you get the appointment that works best for your schedule. And the best way to do that is to plan in advance. Give yourself 2 or 3 months of lead time so you can get that correct appointment. On average, like I said, people study for about 2 to 3 months. So, but if you take that practice exam when you first get started, you may need more time. You may realize, okay, I'm way off compared to where I need to be. I'm going to study for 4 months. It depends on each individual person. Really kind of assess your strengths and weaknesses and go from there. So quickly, this is a screenshot of MBA.com. As I mentioned, this is where you would go to register and take the exam. This is where you would find out everything you need to know about the exam. So if you still have questions after today, this is going to be your best resource for just everything you want to know about the GMAT. You can actually research schools and programs here. You can learn about trends and things like that, news in the business school world. And you can also purchase the prep materials that I mentioned a few slides ago. So it's a great resource. I encourage everyone to go there, create an account if you haven't done so already. It's also where you can download the GMAT prep software that we've been talking about. Outside of that, Facebook and Twitter are a good resource for information as well. We often have representatives from schools or test prep companies, things like that, that can come and help answer your questions that you have specifically. Facebook.com and Twitter.com, both /official GMAT. The YouTube channel is actually pretty good too. There's some good videos as to what you can expect on test day. Good idea to check them out at least once, so you're not taken off guard when you show up at the testing center and they're taking a picture of you and asking you for a signature. Well, if you watch the YouTube video, you'll know that that's coming, and the last thing you want to do is be thrown off on the first section of the exam because you were kind of flustered coming in and things like that. So check out the YouTube channel as well. That's /official GMAT. You can check out the videos that we have. So we do have some time for questions. We have about 10 minutes left if you want to just chat those questions in. Like I said, if you think of something later or, something like that, certainly welcome to look at the website, mba.com, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff to get your questions answered.
Okay, well, Trevor, thank you so much for that great presentation. As Trevor did mention, we do have about, let's call it 11 minutes or so remaining in this hour to answer your questions live, for Trevor to answer your questions live. So go ahead and chat those in on the right-hand side of your screen on the GoToWebinar panel. Actually, if you don't mind, Trevor, I'd like to start off with one of my own questions, which is related to reading comprehension. So I get a lot of questions about, is it a good strategy to read perhaps some well-known magazines or periodicals to prep for reading comprehension? So what are your thoughts on that? And also, if that is recommended, does GMAC recommend a certain set of periodicals to check out, like The Economist or National Geographic and so forth?
As I mentioned, there's not a need for outside information. So really, it's going to be based in what you're reading there in the passage. So I think that those types of things are also, they're important to kind of know what's going on in the world. You can use examples like that, like for the writing assessment portion. Using examples of real-world stuff is certainly not going to hurt you. I think also being well-versed in that kind of stuff is good for the interview process and your personal essays during application. So it's not going to hurt you in any way to know that kind of stuff. For the reading comprehension, I think it's important to get a good feel of what the best way, that you find to answer those questions. So doing practice, and some people like to go through and highlight key points, or some people like to go through and read the whole thing first and then answer questions. So like I said, practice makes perfect. As you saw by the last slide there, you do need to put in the time. You do need to figure out those sorts of things as to how best that you can kind of tackle these sections of the exam.
Great. And Trevor, as you noted earlier, we have a very talented set of folks in the Beat the GMAC community. So by the way, guys, congratulations. You did really, really well in today's sessions for those difficult practice questions, as well as the last session. So by no surprise, we have a question coming in that says, how does one score a 6.0 on the AWA? Is there a specific style of writing that the automated system prefers?
Well, it's going to be the kind of stuff that we talked about. What they're looking for in a 6 essay is, can you develop a position on an issue with insightful reasons and/or persuasive examples? So can you use examples to kind of prove your point, basically? It's going to have to be well organized. Just throwing together random statements and facts and all that kind of stuff is not going to get you a 6. It's got to be well organized, right? You need to have a superior control of language. If having grammatical errors and stuff like that is not going to help you there. It's got to be superior to get a 6. Along those same lines, you want to have You want to understand written English. You can have some minor flaws, but overall, it's got to be pretty good. Um, you know, it's tough to get a 6 for a reason. I mean, it's the top score, right? So it's got to be just outstanding. The software itself kind of looks for patterns and things like that. Um, it's it's complicated to kind of explain how a computer software can grade an essay. Uh, but just remember, you're also having a person grade the essay, a real live person that'll kind of take a look at it. And so go online, MBA.com, look at the prompts, uh, use a thing like GMAT, write if you're worried about this section, see how you would score. You'll get tips. You'll get information about how you can kind of improve your essay.
Yeah, great tips, Trevor. And just to add my own little 2 cents to that as well. So I didn't get a 6 on my AWA. It is hard to get it, but it's certainly possible. Lots of people in our community get it all the time. I think the thing that helped me a lot was exactly as Trevor has suggested, going on to MBA.com, downloading the list of essay prompts. And what I liked to do, a few weeks leading up to the actual test was to at least mentally outline how I would respond to those prompts if I saw them on the test. That's one, and also just trying to do maybe an essay or two every day for like a week or 2 weeks leading up to the test. And it is one of those things where practice makes perfect, and you'll find that just by writing more and more, you get more pithy in terms of your descriptions, and forming these essays becomes a bit easier each time.
Yeah, I mean that's a great idea. Like I said, 30 minutes is not when you really think about it, 30 minutes is not a ton of time to write an essay.
Mm-mm.
So if you can get good at like you said, Eric, outlining what you're going to say, um, you know, it's really going to help you in the long run. If you just sit down at the computer and you just start writing, chances are your essay is not going to be as well organized as you would hope. And because you only have 30 minutes, the chances that you're going to be able to go back and reorganize everything, cut, paste, and all that kind of stuff, right, it's going to get tougher. So if you can kind of get a plan in your head of how you're going to answer uh, the essay portion, uh, that's really going to help you in the long run.
Okay, I see a couple of product-related questions coming in here. So related to GMAT Right, the question is this a one-use or multiple-use product? And I think where this person is coming from is the notion that GMAT Prep is designed to be, two practice tests that you just take one time each. Is that similar for the GMAT Right software?
So GMAT Right, there's two different units. Each has 4 essay prompts, and then you submit those for grading. So um, I guess essentially, yeah, it's a one-time use thing with just those prompts, right? Um, so I think what you would use GMAT Right for is just to get that feedback, right? You get the essay scored and you see how you would do to kind of see where you are. So maybe I would say maybe use something like GMAT Right a little bit later in the process of preparing. Practice, practice, practice. The review guide is going to give you tips and things like that as to how you want to structure and prepare your essays. Then go through with GMAT Right and see what you're actually scoring after you have someone take a look at it and grade it.
Great. This next question is also about GMAC products, and this is one that I'm interested in. So, OG, official guide for GMAT review. Is there going to be a 14th edition that comes out in the next year?
That's a good question. I'm, I'm actually looking that up now because I'm not sure if it's going to be within the next year. Um, the one thing about the guides is that they are a great resource. You know, this is the first one that does have the IR section, so it's a little bit different. I'm not 100% sure on the official release date. If you have an earlier version than the 13th, I would definitely encourage everyone to kind of check out the 13th. Uh, in the past, I think the guides have come out every 3 years or so, 4 years or so, something like that. So I haven't heard any word on official release dates for that, so not 100% sure. But like I said, there are the thing about the guides is that they're always retired GMAT questions. So it's a great resource in terms of getting the best idea of what types of questions are going to be asked. The only thing that the new guide would do is maybe have different questions. So I would also say that we launched a new version of GMAT Prep this year, the software. And what's good about that is you can actually fully customize the different question banks. You can include more data sufficiency questions when you're practicing. You can include more sentence correction questions if you wanted to do that. So that's something I would also check out. Again, sorry, I'm not sure when the new version is coming out, but the 13th, and if you want more practice, the 12th and the 11th, which I'm sure you didn't hear it from me, but you can find online somewhere to purchase.
Gotcha, gotcha. Um, so just one more question here. This is one that I commonly see within our community, which is, you know, it's a bit of a controversial point. So let me caveat
Yeah.
that. With regard to sentence correction,
Yeah.
some of our community members believe, and this may be a myth, that there's a bias more towards an American English grammar style.
Yeah.
So can we talk a little bit more about that? So what if
Sure.
you're more familiar with British English, for example? Is that
Sure.
a
Yeah. Sure.
handicap?
Yeah. So I'll just say about that, we do our best to eliminate that kind of bias from the sentence correction portion. We don't want that to be a factor in someone's score. So the way we design the questions and the way we write them up, we try our best to eliminate that type of problem.
Great. Well, with that, Trevor, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation as well as this very helpful Q&A today.
No problem.
Okay. Okay. So we have been listening to Trevor Reaske, who is currently the Field Marketing Coordinator at the Graduate Management Admission Council, talk about demystifying the GMAT exam. This is part 2 of a 2-part series that we had last week as well as today. If you want to check out part 1, you can go to beatthegmat.com. We have uploaded that video as our featured article right on the homepage. So highly recommend that you take a look at that. Some great tips there. And again, just one final huge thank you to our presenter, Trevor Reaske, today, as well as our friends at the GMAC for taking the time to reach out to our community to educate us on some of these critical insights on the GMAT test and how we can become successful in our MBA admissions as a whole. So big thank you as well to our attendees for both sessions, and wishing you lots of success in the MBA admissions process ahead. All the best, guys.